Many of us, I know, are waiting for that light to shine. Many of us sought it out at the Capitol building on Friday night for a rally called Lights of Liberty. That nationwide rally and vigil was an opportunity for those concerned with what faces those involved in the migration process in this country to be together. And we heard brave and powerful testimony from those whose lives have been shaped by the migration process. Bettina, who we all were so honored to hear from this morning, was there with many of our colleagues and supporters from the legal clinic. Kim Coco was there and delivered an impassioned call for justice, really something. And artists sang, others performed poetry, and in many ways some of the brightest lights of the work of scattering the clouds of unknowing and intimidation were there. Kind of seemed like wherever you went that evening, you could see another person deeply committed to at least deeply concerned with the safety of many of the most vulnerable people in our community right now. And a lot of those people are sitting in this church right now. Not as many of the vulnerable folks as the ones who were there. In fact, I don't think you could have thrown a vote them out sign very far without hitting a Unitarian Universalist at that place. And showing up at a rally, seeing a friend from church, wherever you go to events like this, is something, it's really something in the reputation of Unitarian Universalists that we have earned through years of responding to leaders on some of the edges of the mainstream. It's a reputation that we treasure as we hear people say things like, I don't go to church, but if I did, I'd go to your UU church. It's a reputation really for being a community that answers the call to love those whom society threatens or marginalizes as best we can with the tools we have. It's fair to say we're not so much waiting for the light to shine as we are stocking up on flashlights and batteries. We're putting together that flashlight for this next adventure that we might be on, and the next adventure, and the next. And knowing that, it seems like it's one thing after the next, it kind of makes me wonder, is anybody tired? You can snap if you want if you're not too tired, or you can just answer. I'll ask again, is anybody tired? All right. I am too. And as I look at a lot of my friends from Friday, as I met a lot of you there on Friday, as we spoke about the work we were doing, I could see in so many of the eyes I met, I love this place, that people are tired. They don't want to bend over to pick up their manuscript that they drop on the floor. The lights in many of people's eyes are just getting a little dimmer these days. And it really could be from anything. We could do the list, but really, what's the point? It's just one thing. It's never just one thing that's getting me down. It's probably not just one thing that's getting you down. It's a list of things. It's the list that's on the news, that's on our phones, that's in our email. And the lists aren't anything particularly new. Who doesn't have a to-do list of some kind? Maybe it's written, maybe it's not. I have one. It's 2 columns. It has bolded headings. It's actually quite beautiful, if I can say so myself. It's categorized and organized, takes up 1 sheet. And if I'm ever not sure what I should be doing, I take a look at it, and it has the list of everything I should be doing. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Okay. Remember, one of my favorite sayings, sometimes love looks like a well-managed spreadsheet. It's true. But lists of things we have yet to do, things that we have left undone, in truth, we know, no matter how pretty they look, are exhausting. They're tiring. They're draining. Who the heck wants to look at a list of things we haven't gotten right yet? It's like a checklist for a recipe for perfection. But really, who is better qualified than a group of Unitarian Universalists to think about a list leading to perfection? We have spoken a few times about the kind of people who come into a Unitarian Universalist setting. We've spoken about the experiences they've had in other places, and that a community like this seems, after adventures of faith that took people to many, many, many different places, that this place just seems right. It might be the justice stances that we take or the views we have as a congregation. It might simply be that we take a position at all on justice issues, which is a step up from some other faiths. It might be the open way that we welcome and affirm ways of believing or not believing. But for some, the list of what a church needs to be doing or behaving like gets ticked off here a little bit more than it does in other places. It's a sense that this is the right place for people because we are doing more in the world that seems right than some others. And this is true in a lot of UU settings, not just here. It seems that wherever you go, UUs are on the forefront of what is right. But have you ever wondered, really, why this is? Is it as simple as a group of people who just consistently agree that we will stand with the most vulnerable or take up the cause whose time is just starting to arise? Is coming to a UU church an idea that comes to mind automatically on that evening you decide to pledge to Hawaii Public Radio? Or maybe on that morning that you bought an electric car? Does it just pop into your brain? Or is it something else? Sociologically, here we go. Our tradition stands out from among some of the others that we find around this island. And our history goes back pretty far. The Puritan separatists on the continent referred to, I'm going to learn someday, referred to lovingly, or not so lovingly, as pilgrims. These folks were really the grandparents, the spiritual grandparents of our Unitarian side. Then our spiritual parents grew into adulthood over a few centuries. Our Unitarian and our Universalist parents held close to the teachings of the New Testament and both questioned in some ways the teachings of that church and seemed to them, and those things that they seemed not to be quite in the scriptures. They were, in a way, perfectionists who kind of get it right. And then in their union in 1961 and the birth of Unitarian Universalism, which ushered in a new era of holding as co-equal beliefs and views of the world's religions and an array of other faiths, as well as the beliefs and the practices of humanism, which dispenses mostly with belief in the supernatural. And all these adventures of faith, some of which involved a voyage across an ocean, just to prove how serious they were, definitely have something in common, going to great lengths to show we're right. And this is something I am confident in saying we still do a little bit today. Of course, UUs don't corner the market on going to great lengths to be right. We have plenty of company on that corner. Just come to a General Assembly where people are protesting us. There's lots of corners for people to stand on. But there is something deeper at work there than these important transitions, this family that raised Unitarian Universalism, and it starts starts with Puritans, and it's right in their name. They came here to achieve more than being right, more than being sacred, more than just being free. It was through their belief in a flawless interpretation of the scriptures, into a code of conduct, a way of being that they strove for being nothing short of pure, nothing short of perfect. But what's so interesting about their faith of those early Puritans was that they firmly believed that God had already selected, had preordained who would be saved and who would not. So, you could kind of think, well then why bother behaving? So the Puritan quest for perfection was really a quest to set not just their own behavior perfectly, but to set a perfect example for everyone else who might be watching, for their neighbors, so that everyone around you would be guided to righteousness as well. It was the perfect keeping up with the Goody Joneses, taking it to a whole new level. Puritan jokes don't always track. That's okay. And even our faith parents, the Unitarians and the Universalists, Unitarians, they believed they'd interpret the scriptures more accurately than the Puritans or the Congregationalist churches they grew up in, finding no mention of the Trinity, but holding to the belief in a united God. And more important, really, was the movement of our Unitarian ancestors toward the belief in humanity that with just the right set, the right list of ideas and beliefs that are proved to be beneficial to society, that list could actually achieve some measure of perfection in this life. Universalists saw the scriptures, and they decided that Jesus' death truly conquered sin, overcame hell, and he came back to tell us that good news, and we believed it. They had faith that this event, the Christ event, did redeem all of humanity so that we might live together in perfect harmony as one. A theological utopia. And then, in 1961, with the merger of these faiths, we staked out a path to perfection, coming together to embrace all forms of belief to the extent that they teach us to love one another as ourselves. That's right, make no mistake about it. Perfectionism, a word that has recently come into more and more vogue in psychological circles, for years was a philosophical and theological term for a way of describing a particular worldview. It's not just pop psychology, it's theology. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, really one of the best resources for the nerdily obsessed, has a modest entry on perfectionism and the movement and the school of thought. Like most philosophical movements, there are different schools of thought in the movement. But at its core, perfectionism starts with a conversation about what is good. And then it shapes an ethic or a way of making moral choices based on that good. But luckily, all you have to decide is what on earth is good. It's easy, right? It's dogs. I mean, that's pretty much it. Memes about dogs. Videos of dogs making friends with non-dog animals. Memes about videos of dogs making friends with non-dog animals. I know I'm being a little silly. I'm just citing examples from my own YouTube account this morning. But really, this isn't that strange an example of objective goodness. Because there are two schools of how to agree on what is good. One school looks specifically at what comes from humans. That's the humanist school. And this analysis often works by looking at beautiful works of art, by ways that humans have overcome tyranny together, have done amazing things, adventures of the human spirit. And likely not too surprising, there's another school called the non-humanistic school. but also the forces that move this universe forward. The forces that make up this universe, other universes, whatever this multiverse might be that we are in, with the understanding that these forces were at work long before humans came around, long before Puritans sailed the open seas. And these schools are fundamentally at odds in their analysis of perfectionism. But true to our nature, true to our history as Unitarian Universalists, at the core of our own living tradition, rounding out the last two sources of our own living tradition are, and I quote, number 5, humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. And number 6, spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. If you follow this adventure of ours, from the arriving Puritan separatist grandparents, then to the know-it-all outcast parents of more biblical faiths, and now to a tradition that seeks to uphold as many ideas as it can in good faith, including both schools of thought about the basis for perfectionism, then what you find is that we are even trying to do, as a faith, perfectionism perfectly. And of course, this would be a Unitarian Universalist sermon if there wasn't some Unitarian sticking their nose into the discussion, because it was none other than Ralph Waldo Emerson, famed Unitarian minister and essayist, who is credited with founding some of the branches of perfectionism to this day. Go figure. But this is the thing. It's a trap. Perfectionism is a trap for us. We look at the lists in our lives. Maybe it's a grocery store list. Maybe it's a beautifully crafted to-do list for a job, for a church we love. Maybe it's for the groups we support or the causes we champion. Are we giving enough? Are we showing up enough? Maybe it's the list of sources from our tradition that I've just cited. And we are looking pretty often at lists of what we've left undone. What isn't perfectly handled yet. Not all of us, but a lot of us look at these lists like this. Now, I want you to think for a moment about that person in your life. Imagine a person who does not care what people think, does not care if the cleaning is done, leaves dishes in the sink, does not care what they are wearing when they leave the house, does not give a lick about telling their friends they just binged 3 seasons of the Great English Baking Show and can't wait for the next one, does not care. Aren't you smiling right now, thinking of this person? Don't you kind of love that person for just who they are? They're almost like a dog in human form. When I drove to work today, there was this, it's too long a story, but there were these dogs running with this woman, and the dog, bless this woman's heart, was a runner. She was a runner. But every time her dog wanted to stop and smell something going on, she stopped and just waited for the dog to smell it, and the dog would look up at her and then just start going again. It was just beautiful. Anyway, you just love these people. And they're far from perfect, as any list of what's left undone might prove. But see, if you want to be admired, be perfect. If you want to be loved, be yourself. hearing that statement, you're like, really, TJ, we're going to go all the way through a sermon and you can tell me to love myself? Yeah. But here's the thing. If you heard that statement and you were like, whoa, you're a letter A. If you heard that statement and you're like, duh, you're a letter B. And at coffee hour, all you B's, go find an A. Tell them, you are not perfect, and I love you anyway. I'm not really joking. See, as a young tradition, I know we've gone through a lot of the history here, but listen, as a young tradition, ours doesn't have a lot of history. It doesn't have a lot of history to draw from that's uniquely our own. That's uniquely Unitarian Universalist wisdom. But one of the lessons that is developing is that the experiment of Unitarian Universalism is waiting for the light to shine. It's waiting for that essence to come out of being together that tells us we are home, that we are safe, that we are loved. I think a lot of us are starting to feel that here in this place. I know some people are starting to feel it more and more, which is a blessing. And I know this church in particular has a lot to share about how to cultivate that essence with a lot of other churches in our tradition. But as a wider faith, we have been really, really trying to do faith perfectly, both philosophically, more familiarly. We are trying so hard to get it right. And it has earned us the admiration and the esteem of many. I mean, we've got that whole, if I went to church, I'd go to your church crew. They like us. But I've even heard people who really shouldn't be saying it tell me that they think UU faith might be what even Jesus had in mind for a church than what a lot of churches who are consecrated in his name profess. We might even be doing that perfectly. In many, many, many ways, we are admired by those outside our faith and by those inside our faith, but many who yearn for something unknown, unnameable, unsolvable, that untouchable piece of humanity asks us still, where's the love? Where's that thing we get at church? And I say again, if you want to be admired, be perfect. If you want to be loved, be yourself. On Thursday, I went with a family to a hearing in immigration court. They were there opposing the deportation of a person who entered the country at 14. He's now 24 and is being targeted for deportation to a place where they have no connections or family anymore. I'm not going to get into the merits of the case, but what I remember is the way that a paddling coach showed up for the hearing and explained that all of his young paddlers are his children. What I remember is the way an employer flew from Maui and explained that this young person is family and the only person that her ailing husband who has dementia will respond to for the care he so desperately needs. What I remember is the bravery of a mother walking into a federal building who is entirely undocumented to speak up for her son. What I remember is the bravery of the young person being targeted under threat and under oath, explaining to the judge how blanking ludicrous the entire threatening situation he has endured has become, he was being entirely honest, entirely himself, without regret, without shame. So when the lights, for me, are dimming a little bit in my eyes, or for those, perhaps, of you who are glimpsing justice harder and harder, it's natural, it's fitting to wonder when the light of justice will brighten our pathways again. And it's in situations that no amount of singular personal accomplishment, individual risk, or solitary work can conquer. It's not there. Instead, we are met on a battlefield that will take the united, the cooperative, the loving attention of an ohana, and no individual can give alone. When our family members are threatened over these coming weeks in these raids that we're hearing about, instead of ticking off to-do lists, we can be getting ticked off. Instead of worrying about being right in here, we can fight for our friends' rights to be here. Instead of sailing across an ocean to try and experiment in perfection until we run aground, we can hit the ground running with partners like Bettina and the Legal Clinic and many others around our island, because instead of worrying about this, we can let it go, because we're not going to do it perfectly. It's not perfection, it's love. It's the light that is emerging, the light that comes from letting things go, the light that shines brighter when we are together. Brighter when we trust our friends with the shared work we have to do, and brighter even in this moment, shining forth from where I'm standing, from all of you. If you're wondering where those lights are coming from, look around, because there you are. And may it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen. Now please